we're both from Kenora, Ontario. I used to be a correctional officer back in the day, and I will say that despite my speaking experience, this is the first time I've been mic'd up like this. And the first thing I thought of was that guy from the info commercial that sold his ShamWow and his laptop, right? Stop having a born tuna, stop having a born life. Anyone remember that guy? Totally ShamWow guy. Anyways, so we're going to talk about a little bit of our path, a little bit of our history, our experience with PTSD, my experience on the job, my short tenure as a correctional officer, and then we're going to hear from our lovely bride, her experience, her journey, her recovery, and just basically have a candid presentation about what we're up to, what happened, how we're doing, and what we've learned the hard way. So this is our PTS journey, and essentially myself, as Howard said, I used to be a correctional officer in Kenora, Ontario. I did that job for about 5 years. Didn't have any idea what corrections was till I got in there. So if there's anyone who's a correctional officer, you guys are rock stars. You guys are rock stars. On the other side, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a closet nerd, I'm a fitness enthusiast, and I like sports and everything about sports. And I was essentially a normal guy, living in Kenora with a wife, 2 kids, bought a house, got a full-time job. I thought I was in corrections for a long run. I thought I was ready to go. And then September 14th showed up. And then our lives basically changed. Yep. And so to give you a brief overhaul of what happened that day, you can play the clip anytime.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. A hostage taking at a jail in northwestern Ontario has prompted the Ontario government to launch an internal review. Tonight, word the man is out of hospital, but his recovery is not over. It all unfolded Friday afternoon at the Kenora jail. CTV's Ben McDonnell has more on the man who was taken hostage and his recovery.
One day after inmates took a correctional officer hostage, the grounds around the Kenora jail are relatively quiet. Staff at the facility are debriefing, and the flow of traffic in and out of the jail is being monitored. Online, a fundraising drive is underway, calling father of 2, Daniela Tsentouros, a hero, sending prayers for recovery. A family member saying they had no comment about the hostage situation when reached by CTV News.
Basically, it was just a bunch of commotion to start with. I mean, it wasn't nothing. I guess most of the activity was done inside.
Bob Smith has lived across the street from the jail for 30 years, which he says houses men and women. From his balcony, he says he saw ambulances and fire trucks at the jail around 3 Friday afternoon. An Ontario government spokesperson says in response to this situation, the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services mobilized its crisis intervention teams and deployed negotiators. It's still not clear how the hostage-taking unfolded or how many inmates were involved. Around 5:30, the ministry said the correctional officer's release was secured and he was taken to hospital.
Yeah, he came out on the stretcher, they wheeled him out, and he seemed to be sitting up and seemed to be fine. So, but that's from this distance.
In a statement, a provincial spokesperson says the ministry will launch an internal review into the situation. I can confirm that the officer was released from hospital and is at home recovering. Our thoughts are with the officer and his family during this difficult time. The ministry appreciates the excellent work of the Kenora staff that secured the release of the officer. The Ontario Public Service Employees Union, which represents correctional officers, told CTV News it was with staff at the facility Saturday to offer support. It says the psychological impacts from a hostage-taking can be long-lasting, that the officer is expected to be off work for a significant amount of time, and it's important he gets the help he needs. Beth McDonnell, CTV News, Kenora.
The Kenora Fire Department says it was called to the jail around the same time as the hostage-taking. It tells CTV News inmates lit some clothes on fire, but it was very minor. The department says it was asked to remain on standby in case something else happened.
So that's what happened from a public perspective, in a nutshell. And if anyone's worked in corrections, there's a very big difference between what the public is told and what actually happens behind the doors. So essentially, to give you a snapshot, there was a range of male inmates whom I worked with many times before. I had a good rapport with them, and for whatever reason, they decided on that day that they were going to take one of us, and it just happened to be me. So over the course of about, I'd say, 4.5 to 5 hours, a lot of bad things happened to me. Assault, torture, handcuffed, knife point, a lot of stuff. And there's a certain amount of things that happen in someone's mind when you go through that much trauma, spare you the gory details. Essentially, I found myself at one point convinced that I was dead. I had what I can only explain to be an outer body experience where I saw myself physically in the cell, handcuffed to the bunk with the inmate who had the knife. And I was convinced that despite all the negotiations and all the stuff happening outside, that I died somehow. And I just thought, there I am, a 36-year-old husband of two, and I'm dead. What a shitty way to go out. But as I kind of kept staring at myself, I realized, well, if I'm not dead, what's going on here? Something in my brain activated to the point where I had a rational thought kind of pop up in all the chaos. And in that rational thought, I really only thought about 3 scenarios that was going to happen in that moment. The first scenario was that I'm dead. The second scenario was that I'm going to somehow find a way to kill this guy. And the third scenario was, maybe I'll get out of here. So I tried very hard to think about the first scenario and tried only to focus on scenario 2 and 3. And then thankfully, through the grace of God or through some amazing professionals on the outside and a pretty good negotiator, if you ask me, I found myself out of there. Thankfully, physically, more or less alive. And that's me the moment I got out. Now, that's a lot to compress in a short amount of time. And trust me, if I wanted to, and I had all day, I could talk about this for hours. But we got to keep on schedule today, right? So at that point, my wife and I basically were kind of faced with this reality of like, now what do we do? Now what's our life going to be like?
Yeah. So while all that happened, I was sitting at home waiting for a phone call. I had gotten a call saying, there's been an incident, they have John. And that was all I knew. And so I sat there waiting with our family for, basically one of 2 calls. We have John, or I'm gonna have to figure out how to tell my kids that their dad is gone. So luckily, we made it to the hospital, and I knew my mom is a nurse, my dad was a volunteer firefighter for decades, and I knew that, there would probably be some long-term mental health things to look out for, but I wasn't really prepared for what that reality actually meant as a spouse. So one of the first things I realized really quickly that was such a piss off was that he did not want to talk to me at all. I could see the struggle, I could see the reclusiveness. I wasn't who he wanted to talk to. And so I had to find ways to support what his healing journey was going to look like and put my ego aside, because as a wife, as a nurturer, you see your loved one struggling, you want to jump in, you want to help, you want to give them what they need, but if they're not talking to you, you're sort of just left guessing, so to speak.
At the same time, while Danielle is trying to navigate what's happening to me, I myself am trying to figure out, how do I fix this? Because my initial thought was like, well, I got to get back to work. All my other colleagues and all of my other co-workers, like, they were there too. They saw this play down, like, they're probably going to need some help. So I immediately put my recovery plan aside, whatever that was going to be, and I went to everyone else. I wanted to be the guy to say, how are you doing? Are you okay? Do you need something, right? At the same time, I was also looking at this kind of going, physically I feel okay. I was a little busted up with some foot marks on me and a gnarly black eye, but I didn't have anything physically done to me, for the most part. So I assumed that once I go through the process, I should be back to work in no time, right? I'll go to the appointments, I'll do the paperwork, I'll take whatever time off I need, and then I'll go back to work. And it's funny because in that whole experience, I learned very quickly that there's no timeline for this. I actually had a really good psychologist who I thankfully got paired up with. And one of my first questions when I went to my first session was, okay, so how long is this going to take? And he looked at me like, what do you mean? I said, well, how many appointments? Until what? Until I can go back to work. And he looked at me and he goes, oh, you should probably not think about a timeline. And right away I'm like, so 10? Like 15, right? I don't care how many appointments you tell me, I'm going to we're gonna fix this, you and me, we're gonna get this done. And through trial and error and trial and error and trial and error and a lot of stubbornness and a lot of just me being me, I learned the hard way that I'm not going back to work anytime soon. I got other stuff to figure out.
If anyone here has lived with anyone with, PTSD or mental health issues, you'll understand the feeling of wanting to try and control the bad moments as much as you can. And for me, that looks like the extreme of hypervigilance, the extreme of control. And a perfect example was like our first Christmas. So this happened in September, so our first Christmas, both of our families live in the same town. John's sisters, nieces and nephews, and so Christmas is always like a big to-do. But it was just gonna be at John's childhood home, only our family, no outsiders, safe, comfortable, familiar. And then it was 4:30 and I'm packing up the kids and I'm packing up the gifts and I go into the bedroom and I see John doing this. And I was like, are you changing? And he was like, I can't go. And I went, to dinner, to your parents? And he was like, I can't go, it's not safe. I don't feel safe. And so in that, what felt like a long time, but was actually probably 30 seconds, I had this internal struggle of like, do we all stay home? Do I have to tell kids Christmas is like, and so I made sure he was okay physically, mentally. I knew he was struggling, but I kind of thought like, do you want me to stay home? And he said, no, I want to be alone. And I said, okay, but are you safe? And he said, I'm safe. And so I packed up the kids and made up, Dad was not feeling well, which I guess technically was true. And off we went. But after that moment, anytime we got invited anywhere, I was, who's all gonna be there? What's the itinerary look like? How long are people staying? Oftentimes it would result in us taking 2 vehicles so that if John needed to leave, like he had his own exit plan. And like, it was just all these things of like, I can control this, nothing bad will happen. Which was not the case. And I had to come to terms with like, I can't keep putting that mental load on myself because it's not really up to me. I can do things that are obvious to help support him, but all the extra stuff that I thought was gonna make a difference wasn't going to help. If a mood or a trigger was gonna come, I had no control over that.
And as hard as I tried, because I wanted that control, I wanted to get a handle on what was happening to me, not understanding that my brain was basically trying to figure itself out. And so all the good things that came with what eventually was a PTSD diagnosis, I learned the hard way. So whether it was nightmares, whether it was hypervigilance, whether it was just being terrified of not being in the only 3 places I felt safe, at home, at the gym, and in my truck. If I wasn't any of those places, I was ready to throw down and ready for just the world to end, constantly. And that was exhausting. And as much as I wanted to be with family, or be with friends, or accept the help that was being, thrown my way, because there was a lot of help. I had more help than what I knew what to do with. But as someone so eloquently put it to me, a tsunami of love is still a tsunami, and I didn't know how to handle that. Plus, with Kenora being such a small, close-knit town, this had never happened before. So it wasn't like I could go talk to someone else, hey, you got me taken hostage? How's that like? I was so alone in every sense of the word, yet surrounded by more help than what I knew what to do with. So it was this constant battle of, I need your help, but I can't handle it. It was almost to the point where I'd say, I can be around you, you just gotta be about 100 feet over there, and I'll be good. Just stay over there, don't look at me, don't talk to me. Just knowing that you're there worked.
developed a strategy that seemed to work for us, and it was sort of along the lines of something Anne-Marie said, but because me, in my nature, if I see a loved one, a friend, a stranger having a hard time, like I want to jump in and help right away and offer a solution. And John fucking hated that. Because I'd be like, what's wrong? What can I do? Blah, blah, blah. And he would be like,
fuck off.
But so we came up with something that sort of appeased both of us. And so when I would see him having a hard time, I would say to him, I see you navigating something. What do you need? And sometimes it was like, I need you to fuck off. And sometimes it would be like, I don't know, can you just sit here, but like, don't talk to me. I don't want to feel alone, but I don't want you to talk to me. And then sometimes he would be able to tell me what was wrong or what had happened, and then we'd be able to move on. But it was me being able to like feel like I had given that support, but putting the ball in his court to be like, here's what I need. This was a hard one for both of us. And it was your psychologist. And sometimes John would ask me to come to his appointments because John's not a talker. He didn't like the idea of going to a psychologist, and so sometimes he would be like, can you just come with me? And so sometimes I would go. And his psychologist said something in one of his earlier appointments, because John had said, you know, along the lines of how many appointments, when am I going to be better? And he said, like, I just want to go back. And his psychologist said, more eloquently, but he had said, like, that John's gone. Like, he doesn't exist anymore. Like, John, before September 14th at, 1 o'clock, he's gone. Now you're gonna figure out this new John. Some of those elements of old John will be there and some won't. And you have to sort of grieve. And that's okay. And that was hard because I just turned 40 last month, but I've been with John since I was 16. And so I know everything about him. I knew his quirks, his mannerisms, his likes, I knew everything about him. And now, here I was at 32, going, okay, I gotta figure out who you are all over again. And that was devastating because I had spent the majority of my life with him, and now oftentimes he felt like a stranger.
I had a hard time with that thought, right? To be told that, the version of the person that you are, you can't be that person anymore, you gotta figure out this new person. I fought that very hard. I remember having that conversation, being told, you what? And he goes, that guy's gone, and I'm like, I'll prove you wrong. Not gonna happen. Nope, I'll find him. I'll figure this out. I kept telling him, right? And just through trial and error and doing things the hard way, and between family and friends, and just seeing people figuring me out too while I was trying to figure out / accept who I am now. That's hard. It's hard to be told that. It's a harsh reality. And so yeah, we went through a grieving process where I was kind of like, I'm not that guy anymore. I can't do what I did before. I can't be that person I was before. There are elements of me that are still there, right? And now I have to figure out, what do I do with me now? Almost like a rebirth, if you would, right? But a lot of it was like internal dialogue, just trying to stop telling myself that I'm broken, that I'm no good, that I'll never be that person who I was before, that I've got to figure out, what this looks like. And maybe she'll come with me, maybe they'll come with me, maybe she won't, right? It was just this really crappy reality of like, all right, I can cry about this forever, or I can just figure this out. And so that's what we've been doing for the most part, right?
So all of that has kind of led us to the now, and the past 8 years almost of figuring this out, figuring out who we are as individuals, as a couple, as parents, Because one of the things for me in my part of this was that for 5 years, I was solely focused on John and his healing and his recovery and making sure that my kids pretty much didn't know anything had happened, couldn't tell anything was different, which of course they could. That they were young, but they noticed a difference. Like, Dad's not as spontaneous. Like, Dad doesn't like loud noises. Like, Dad always has his backpack and has to have his own, like, all these things they noticed.
Dad's capacity has gone from this to this with everything, so.
But it took me about 5 years to acknowledge that I had also experienced trauma that day and to work my way through that, because this happened in 2018. John's recovery was slowly happening, and then COVID hit and we were stuck at home. We were thriving, like everybody else, I'm sure, stuck at home, right?
Great times.
PTSD, kids doing online school, it was just so awesome. But it was during that time, and a conversation with an unlikely source in my father-in-law, who is the absolute best, but he's very Greek, and they don't talk about feelings very much. But we were having a conversation, just the two of us, and he asked if we were going to sue the Ontario government for what happened. And at that point, we hadn't gone through the court process or anything yet because COVID had delayed everything. And I said, I don't know, that's up to John. And he looked at me so matter-of-factly and he said, it's up to you. It happened to you too. And that was the first time anybody had just taken the moment to say that. And I didn't know that I needed that acknowledgement, but I am not sure without that acknowledgement if I would be standing here sharing my story, because it was because of that conversation and being stuck at home that I decided to just start writing down my thoughts and my feelings. And so I started a blog and I started an Instagram page to go with it, and I thought maybe someone will read this. And then I slowly had people reaching out being like, oh my God, I know what that feels like, or oh my God, my spouse does that too. And it was this really healing moment for me, being stuck in my house, where I found this connection that I didn't know I was desperate for. So, my new husband, John's always been into fitness. There was at one point he was a marathon runner, and then he got into CrossFit and weightlifting, but that was sort of just like, I like doing this. Now, that's like a non-negotiable for John in terms of his mental health and his moods, but also in his recovery. Twice now I've watched him train and set goals and compete at the World Police and Fire Games, once in Winnipeg, which is sort of our backyard, and last summer when he drove all the way down to Alabama by himself, just to say that he was going to follow through with that goal. He's also, I am not seasoned at this, but this is John's, probably 7th or 8th time presenting.
First time with this.
First time with this. He's done multiple podcast interviews and YouTube channel interviews, and so watching him use his story not only to help others, but as a healing journey, as a piece of his healing journey, has just been super inspiring. And yeah, we've found new connection in these last 8 years almost of, traveling together and having that cliche thing of, tomorrow is not promised. And so, taking the trips, planning the date nights, all those things that are easy to push aside when you're busy and you have kids. Like, this was a chance for us to be like, okay, it's cliche, people say it all the time, you know, you've got to make the time. We're making the time.
And this is just a small example of just how amazing my bride has been in the last, since this happened to us, because for the longest time, yeah, she put everything on hold in every sense and became my protector, became my guardian, and became my angel, and just made sure that I was taken care of. Even when I didn't want to be taken care of, she was right there. When I told her to go places, she would, and then she would come right back. All while raising our two beautiful daughters, keeping the house on hold, taking in a second dog, which I still don't understand why we did that. And just seeing how much resilience she's got, and how strong she's gotten, and how fierce she's becoming in her own healing journey. And now she's kind of reaching out on a bigger platform with bigger audiences and connecting to those folks. Like she said, the community that she was able to find, and the partners behind the folks on the front lines. Like, it happens to all you guys out there, and no one sees what happens to your partners and how the hurt affects them. You guys have the best view and you see it from a first person point of view, and you all need to be acknowledged regardless of what role they're in, regardless of what career they're in. It's happening to you too as well, and to see Daniela kind of like wave that flag and make those connections out there with people, while at the same time still holding our world together, it's been fantastic. So yeah, it's so anybody less than her would have given up on me a long time ago, long time ago. So yeah, like I said, it's hard to encapsulate everything in the last 8 years in 3.5 minutes per meeting, but this is the first time we've kind of shared our story together, which is kind of neat. So we're humbled and blessed and very grateful for every opportunity that we can do this. And I've always said, even on my own side, if what I share or what we share resonates with just one person in any way, shape, or form, then that's worth it. Then we've done what we wanted to do, right? So yeah.
Yeah, so as I said, John has presented multiple times on his own. I have started speaking and done a few podcasts on my own. We're both very open books. We share pretty openly struggles, the wins, everything in between. So John thought this was funny.
Thought that'd be funny.
You can follow us or don't, but those are our respective Instagram accounts where we get pretty candid and open, and are happy if you have questions and want to send a DM or anything like that, please feel free. I want to thank a big thank you to Colleen for reaching out to me and for putting us in this amazing space, and thank you for listening, and 2 minutes early.
These are your gifts. For the graduate.
Did you get them?
I'll do a small one.
This is incredible. You guys are incredible. This is what dealing with PTSD and improving things is all about. You guys are very special. That was a very special presentation. Anybody not touched by that presentation needs to call somebody. And I didn't even call them tonight. We wish you only the best. It's an amazing love story. I mean, the bottom line, it is a love story. And you battled your illness together. You acknowledged the illness, both of you. And you're going to continue to make very, very important impressions on a lot of lives. You're welcome to the foundation. And you're stuck with us now. Thank you. Are you joining me in this?